in inviting me here today. Definitely biased about that, but you guys are lucky to have Patty. So thank you all for being here today, because no doubt there are a million other places that you could be, and recognizing that this is something you want to learn about, something you might want to help your communities with. It's not just for the workplace, it's for everybody, but also it really will help. Hopefully learning these laws will help you in your own behaviors, in responding to behaviors. We have two sort of prongs for this training today. The first will be just to go over some laws and some changes in laws, some really important changes that have happened just recently as this summer. And then the second part is going to be talking about not so much the behaviors that you see, the behaviors you can recognize or acknowledge, but the behaviors that are in the subconscious. And we all have them. They are nothing to be feel guilty about, but we have them. But we do need to recognize how our subconscious affects our decision making, which then can affect, as David was saying, your hiring, your profitability, your public perception. There's so many different implications for how the subconscious affects somebody in the workplace. So I'm going to, in terms of process, you can put things in the chat room. I tend to get distracted a little bit, and sometimes I forget to look at it, but we do have some polling that we'll be doing and some interactive questioning. So I will try to pause after a couple slides to take questions. I'm happy to do that. And I want you to get out of this whatever you want. I kind of culled all this information together and hope it's what's going to be helpful to everybody. So I'm going to share my screen now because I don't think you have the PowerPoint. Oh boy, where's my PowerPoint now? Did I share the wrong one? Hang on a second. What did I do? I had it there. Oh, it's here. Is this the PowerPoint? Okay, you guys see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sarah, I was gonna have to help. You're gonna have to help me in the first second. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the slideshow from the beginning. Here we go. All right, so the second slide actually is where we're gonna start. And it's with the basics. So I'm sure you all know there are workplace laws that prohibit discrimination and harassment in the workplace. In addition to doing that, most of the workplace laws, either whether they're federal, state, or local, require some kind of education. So you should know, as the managers of your companies or either working with your HR, what kind of educational component the laws have. Some used to have in-person training, but now they're mostly online, but there are a lot of requirements, not so much in Massachusetts, but in New York, there are some really stiff requirements for educational programs annually. And thirdly, most of the laws will have a method for redress. So in the law, it will direct an employee who has a complaint to a Commission for Civil Rights or some panel or an appeals board. Those are sort of the three big areas that every law will have regarding discrimination. And we're not necessarily here today to discuss how you're going to defend a legal case that comes in, although I'm happy to provide some tips if you need them. But we're going to focus more on how you can avoid completely and have internal control over the behaviors that would maybe rise to the level of a complaint that someone would want to make against you or your company or somebody else within your company. All right, so the first poll we're going to have is so I can gauge the session here. And the question is, have you received workplace rights training in your role as, I put CEO, but I'm sure you all have different roles, but the polls are open now. The question is no. Oh my gosh, no. Is everybody 100% no? No. Okay, two of the people voting. Okay. Yes, in person, which would mean from an HR person. Online, which a lot of people go onto WebExes, webinars, or yes, some other kind of self-study. Perhaps you're a lawyer yourself and you learned it in the background or at another job. You could do that, but I'm trying to focus on your role as CEO. How much have you focused on this workplace rights training? All right, so the poll is, how many people do we have? Okay, 14, great. So Sarah, you're controlling the polling, right? Or am I doing that?
Yes, I am. So you guys should be able to see your results.
Okay. All right. So 50% of you have had no training. So congratulations on being here. And I'm sure after this, you'll want to eat up anything you can find online. People who have had HR and legal, if you want to put in the chat that you think you have a fantastic HR legal department, that's great, because people are always looking for some assistance, or if it's outside counsel or somebody that helps. And online, great, because there's a lot of good products out there. And then other people, maybe you could be teaching this because you've had some self-study. Is anybody a lawyer in the group? Anybody in the, now how do my chat? Am I able to see this chat? Sarah? I can't see.
Yeah, so if you click on the chat button on below, then it should show
It's not
up.
popping up for me for some reason.
We don't have anything in the chat right now.
Okay, well, that's fine then. Okay, so good. So we have everybody's a different spectrum of, or continuum of education, which is great. And hopefully you'll learn something more today. So the next slide that I want to get to, for some reason, do you have to get rid of this poll? Stop sharing results? I don't know what that is. Okay. Let's just look for a minute at leading federal workplace laws, because I know David had mentioned that there are 13 big laws and we're not going to cover them all today. And I don't believe in death by PowerPoint at all. So I'm just having these here for you for a take home. We're not going to get to all these laws, but you should know as the head of a company that these laws exist. The one in the farthest right bottom corner, the Fair Labor Standards Act, is the act that determines whether you have to pay overtime, time and a half to your employees, whether there's a minimum wage, which is set by the standard of the state. So there are some laws in here that will not impact your company because it may be small enough that you don't get family and medical leave coverage for your employees. But these are all very, very important laws. And there are a few others. If you're in the restaurant industry, there's Occupational Safety and Health Act. I didn't add all of them, but these 9 are really important. And if you have a labor force that could organize, then you're going to be covered by the National Labor Relations Act. And that's an important law to be aware of, because you cannot treat somebody differently based on their interest in having concerted action together. So there are a lot of different ways that you have to look at your own company and whether something's going to apply. If there's something that you want to ask about any of those, let me know. I just wanted to have them there for you. Today, what we're going to talk about is discrimination. So the civil rights, of course, civil rights exists for voting and for Title IX education and healthcare, but civil rights in the workplace, most of the law is by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Really important law, and one that has 5 bases of protection. So on the left side of the chart here, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, protects individual people from being treated in a discriminatory manner on the basis of sex, race, color, national origin, and religion. That's all in Title VII. I don't know if you all are aware, but this summer, the Supreme Court decided a case called Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, where 3 employees of different companies had got to the Supreme Court with their cases that involved sexual orientation and gender or gender identity or transgender status. And the Supreme Court decided that they didn't need to do anything else with the law, because on the basis of sex meant on the base that you're protected on the basis of your sexual orientation and your transgender status. It was a huge law, and we could talk about it if anybody has any questions, but it's a huge case. That case will go down in history books, and every law student will have to know that case. The text of Title VII, which was written in 1964, was determined to cover people who are transgender or are homosexual, which was, I think, really an important effort and something that was long overdue. Only 22 states in this country protected transgender employees from discrimination because the law, the Supreme Court hadn't decided it yet. So now it's the law of the land, really important case. If anybody has any questions about that, just let me know, and feel free to unmute yourself and stop me. So that's the left side, is all coming out of Title VII. The right side are separate laws in addition to Title VII that are really important as well. The disability coverage for an employee based on their protection based on their disability, either mental disability or physical disability, is from the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Then Age Discrimination Act, over the age of 40, people are protected from being discriminated against under the ADEA. There is no law that protects anybody from discrimination or reduced benefits, or failure to promote based on their being young. People would like that to be, because people feel they get into the workplace, they're not paid enough because they're young, but there is no law that protects people from being young. And military service protects employees. That was based on the Veterans Act that covered folks who were coming back from wars and were treated poorly by employers. And then genetic information is a relatively new law, and that protects people on the basis of their family medical history, their own history. They may have a genetic disorder, they may have inherited something. Basically, that law says you can't use someone's genetic information because it's just not relevant to whether or not they can do a job. And lastly, union affiliation. You cannot discriminate against someone based on their interest in joining, forming, or assisting a union. So there we have it. Those are the laws that protect from the discrimination for individuals. And the court system has created this harassment part of the law. So everybody would know, if I asked David, and if David said to me, well, Paula, you'd be great at this job, but I don't want to hire any women in this job. I'm not interested in having a woman in this job. Clearly that is going to be discrimination. And that's just the direct discrimination, denying me a benefit on the basis of my sex. If you were a man, I'd hire you, but you're a woman. Discrimination. Simple. It's not always, I'm not going to hire you, you're a woman. Sometimes it's, I'm going to make it so difficult for you to work here, or this place is so difficult that I've impacted your ability to work here. And that's what's called harassment or hostile work environment. Now I'm going to just pause here for a second to see if anybody has any questions. I know I'm giving you a lot, and I want to get to you all talking about your workplaces a little bit, but I do want to get this is everybody okay with what's going on so far? Just not, okay. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. All right, so we're moving on to something those are the laws, and that's, you want to steer clear of any of those laws because you don't want to be dragged, obviously, into litigation. Legal actions are expensive. They are bad for public policy, even if they're not based on the facts. You do not want to have to get dragged into litigation. So what we want to do is develop a positive workplace culture that prohibits any of those types of behaviors from existing. And the positive, it comes from leadership. It comes from you. You cannot have a positive workplace culture if the leadership of the culture, the leadership of the company does not buy into it. So you can have you can say, not you, but people can say anything they want about how they really want their company to be positive and inclusive and diverse and all that. But if they don't actually show it and put their money where their mouth is, it will never happen. So thank you again for being here, because obviously it's important to you. Also, positive workplace culture increases your reputation, your profitability, your retention, all that. Toxic workplace cultures, on the other hand, will basically ruin a company, ruin a person's reputation, will definitely lead to employees leaving. And I've identified 5 basic areas that you need to focus on when you're worrying about the culture. And the most important one, I think, for the toxic is the bullying and disrespect right now. And often it can lead to illegal activity and discrimination, but it doesn't always. But the bullying and disrespect is what we're trying to work on, which will then sort of take over all the other areas. So you guys can take a look at what I think are important parts of workplace cultures and have been listed in many other areas. And the one thing I say about the managers should be visible, vocal, and active about creating a positive workplace culture. I think the toxicity issue is one that we were dealing with Ellen DeGeneres and other people that, you don't really know what's going on, but you hear the word toxic and it's in the news and it's about your company and it's a bad deal. So we're going to set the standards. I think this is where we're going to have another poll, Sarah. All right, so the question is, does your company have a written handbook or code of ethics requiring employees to conduct themselves at all times in a manner that reflects creditably creditably on your company.
This is so fully specific. We do have some rules, for example, but not exactly addressing like that.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Or that could be a yes if you have rules. I mean, are they written, or are they just sort of?
Yeah.
Okay. Written's okay. Yeah. Handbook, code of ethics. As long as it's something that is talking about how people need to conduct themselves. That's important. All right. We need one more to vote, I think. So most people seem to be a part of being a company that has written handbooks. So that's great. That's the first question that I would always ask anybody who's saying, hey, I'm kind of concerned about our culture, or making sure that we're doing the right things on a daily basis. And a written handbook is the start. It's the way to let people know what's expected of them and what you expect of them and what management's expecting of them. It also limits your liability in the future. When somebody does something, you can point to it and say, that's not part of what we espouse here at this company. So there's a liability issue there. You also nip bad behaviors in the bud, because possibly the conduct that they're doing isn't actually rising to the level of federal discrimination, but it could get there. But you could talk to them about it based on that. You're going to avoid bad public images when you hold people to these written policies as well. I have a slide that's going to help you develop. For those who said no, there's a slide that will help you develop one, and there are day-long classes that people take just developing their written code of ethics and what they expect out of their their people when they do onboarding. Oops. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that. The workplace expectations is the most important thing that you need to set for your office environment. You are responsible for not only in the office, but you are responsible for the other people that your employees may come into contact with. And you are responsible for any sort of off-site meeting or happy hours, which probably don't happen any longer at bars based on COVID. But any of this, you have to understand that that's part of your work environment. It doesn't end with the walls of your office. And the types of behaviors that you need to worry about can go from subtle to offensive to severe. And all of those cases, there's somebody who is going to say, it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't really that bad. That needs to go away. The issue of it wasn't really that bad. It really needs to be our written policy, and the way we're going to conduct ourselves does not allow that type of behavior. So subtle to extreme, inside or outside the office, with any people that your employees come into contact with. And that's really important too, because I think a lot of people, they don't really maybe take the pulse of employees. How was that person with you? How did you react to things that they said? And it's really important to do that. This is just okay. So let's talk about what a hostile work environment is legally. A hostile work environment exists when an employee suffers from, whoops, what happened? Should I go back? Unwelcome conduct because of their membership in a protected class, and the conduct is so severe or pervasive as to alter the conditions of employment. It's a high bar. People say, oh, they're going to get sued, you're going to get sued. It is a high bar. This is the federal standard for what has to be proven for a hostile work environment. It doesn't happen all the time. You can't believe the cases that I've dealt with that I thought behavior was egregious, and a judge would say, nah, not really. I think it was okay. So you're not looking for determining whether or not a federal judge who doesn't know you and doesn't know your company has determined that this place is a hostile work environment, or that your friend who's going to a job that you're worried about is a hostile work environment. You are going to worry about the underlying conduct. Now, another thing is you're responsible for the conduct if you knew or should have known about it. So that's a really important part of the hostile work environment. Every word on that sentence that I read has been litigated about what is a suffering from, what is the unwelcome conduct? What is the membership in a protected class? What does severe mean? What does pervasive mean? What's a condition of employment? And you don't want to get into that. You honestly don't want to care. You want to worry about conduct. There's a case that was a Supreme Court case called Farragher v. Boca Raton, which is this young lifeguard, and she was in Boca Raton, and she was a seasonal lifeguard, and she was treated horribly by the two marine biologists who were responsible for the center where she was at the beach. And she ended up quitting the job. They treated all of the lifeguards, all the young female lifeguards horribly. This was in 1998. And they would write pictures they would put their pictures up on the wall with grotesque sayings. They would grab them. They would say, if you don't go out with me this weekend, you're going to have to clean all the latrines. They were just awful. And so she went to another marine biologist at the center further up the beach and said, what can I do here? Like, this is awful. I don't think you guys know, but we're being treated terribly. And he said, well, I don't know. They're not in my chain of command. There's really nothing I can do. I can't, I'll talk to them, and nothing happened. So she finally quit her job because it was just terrible and she couldn't handle it any longer. And she went and talked to a friend who said, that sounds like you were discriminated against. It seems like you had a really hostile work environment. And so she said, oh, okay. She filed a Title VII claim against the city of Boca Raton. That was her employer. So the city of Boca Raton, of course, is, miles away from the beach. In the city manager was working in a high rise, who said, what do you think the response of the city manager was to this claim based on how I knew or should have known? We didn't know. I didn't know. Nobody told us. We had no idea that this was happening to this young woman. So of course we're not liable. We're not liable for this hostile work environment because they were not her supervisor. They weren't supervisors. They were just marine biologists that were supposed to be responsible for them. So they said, we in management were not responsible for this, and we had no idea. So it wound its way through the courts, and she won at the lower level. Then it went to the circuit court, and she lost. Finally, the Supreme Court took on this case. And you could tell, because I listened to the oral argument of the Supreme Court, you could tell that the Supreme Court was just annoyed. And the justices were asking questions like, so you get to just literally ignore workers and not care what's happening to them? And they started asking questions about their policies. So does the city of Boca Raton have a policy against the treatment of people, in a hostile way, against discrimination on the basis of sex, hostile work environment? Oh yes, we absolutely do have one of those. We have a policy. And so that opened the door for the Supreme Court to say, well, was Jennifer Farragher ever given the policy? And they're like, well, no, because HR really didn't get all the way up to the beach all the time. She started and there was a reason she didn't have it. Well, does the policy contain any sort of redress for somebody who has a complaint? Oh, yes, we have in there that they can contact this person and that person. And once again, was Jennifer Farragher going to have any idea of where she could have gone? No, we didn't get that to her. Did you train anybody on this? No. Do you have any training? I don't think they trained the lifeguards. So basically, by the end of the oral argument, you could tell where this was going. Supreme Court did not care that they did not know. They basically said, you failed to exercise reasonable duty to prevent this from happening. And that was a huge wake-up call for all these corporations who were hiding behind knew or should have known as the hostile work environment. So now when you look at your own companies, you have to say, are we exercising reasonable duty to tell people we have a policy, show them the policy, update it, make sure they know where they can go when they have a problem under this policy. These are what lawyers, went crazy talking to all these corporations. So that's why it's really important now, because it's not optional to be reasonable about a policy. Then you can say, well, then just don't have a policy. That's sort of the sneaky way to say, if you don't want to reasonably educate on the policy or disseminate the policy, we just won't have one. And without a policy, you're going to be a toxic work environment. So you kind of have to have a policy, and you have to reasonably disseminate it and educate on it. And the Supreme Court's going to require it. And so no amount of burying your head in the sand, no pun intended, with the city of Boca Raton, is going to keep you from being liable for what happened to Farragher and the other ladies, the other women who were on the beach. Oops, sorry. Okay, so now let's talk about you guys, because the Supreme Court, you know, can dish out all this information, but the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission handles the cases that come in. So they handle the cases that come in from Title VII. And this commission, based in DC with regional offices all over the country, had thousands of cases in 2016. They said the cases are getting more and more every year. What is going on here? We have these laws on the books. We have Supreme Court telling us to, you know, knock it off. What is happening? So they did a study to see, you know, why is so much harassment happening? And they came up with this risk factors for, let me see if I can do this, risk factors for harassment, which is their list of factors, you'll see this on the left side, that tend to lead to more harassing types of workplaces. They did major surveys, and they surveyed all the cases, then they looked at cases that hadn't become cases, and these are all, I'm not going to read them all, but they're really important. And if you have some time, go through these, because your companies actually may be at risk for some of these behaviors. They identified these because they increased the likelihood of the misconduct and the unlawful discriminatory harassment in the workplace. Now, when I would go over this with congressional staffers, almost literally you could tick off almost everyone. Homogeneous workforce, or homogeneous, whichever way you'd like to say it, is a really important one. But also you have social discourse outside of work. People are talking about their political views, and you have a young workforce, high value employees. You have a senator walking through the door. That's really important. So these were all really important indicators of potential for misconduct. And one is on there that was, I think, based on restaurants. There's so many, it's kind of sad, but there was one where alcohol was, readily available, or, it was working around kind of odd hours. And so take a look at this when you have time. We could go over each one, but we're not going to, because I want to talk to you about I want to talk to you more about the whole idea of whether your company is at risk. So what happened? Oops, sorry. All right, so do we have another poll coming up? Yes, okay, so our next poll is going to be, before I get to the poll, the question that the EEOC was saying was, why did so many of these harassing environments exist? How did they get that they were like bubbling over, that people were coming to us to try to help them, rather than going to their managers to say, I can't take this anymore. So why weren't they stopping the behavior before it became a case? I want you to I asked this question of hundreds of Capitol Hill staffers, and I'm going to tell you what they said on the whole, but I want you to, what you think, not so much your company, but maybe what you think the biggest reason that an employee might not report inappropriate behavior. Fear of being labeled a troublemaker or disloyal, fear of retaliation, fear of not being believed, not sure how to handle it at all, and thinking that someone else might address the situation. They're all legit, and they're all answers, but let me know what you think the answer would be. Or not would be, but might be. All right, couple more seconds. All right, we have everyone in? I think so. So the winner is fear of retaliation. So your group feels that that would be a reason. It's a legit reason. The reason that the congressional staffers had was A, which I think received the fewest. Fear of being labeled a troublemaker or disloyal. And when I dug in a little more on what do you mean troublemaker or disloyal, they said, I would have to report something to the chief of staff. The chief of staff is so busy. He or she doesn't have time to deal with my BS, and the chief of staff were like, what? That's crazy. Of course I want to know if you're being harassed by a lobbyist or somebody else. I mean, of course I want to know that. And they also said, well, this might make the senator or the member of Congress in the limelight for having a workplace that's hostile, and I wouldn't want to that would be a disloyal thing. So what you all thought was maybe sort of the least of the or some of you was really the most important for them. But I do think that all of the others, retaliation, not being believed, and of course someone else addressing the situation is just sort of a whole nother bystander intervention class that hopefully you guys will get someday, because bystanders not doing anything is a huge problem. So the when I did do some on Capitol Hill, some training with some members of Congress, and every once in a while a member would actually come to the training and sit in for the 2 hours, which was amazing. And one member of Congress sat in, and when I asked this question one time, he stood up and said, Paula, hold on a second. I want you all to know, and he was so impassioned about it, that I care about you and what you are experiencing, and I don't care who it is I have to talk to. I don't care who it is I have to deal with. I don't care if it's the #1 donor that we have. I am going to handle it. And I can tell you there was like silence in the room, and all 20 staffers thought, okay, this congressperson has buy-in. I know now that I have heard from him. And and he's the same congressman that wrote a letter saying, we learned so much from you, Paula. Thank you so much for coming. Come back and teach us more. So his leadership right there was the message to the members of the members of his staff. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but they have to know that you're buying in, because A and E both have to do with just sort of not happening, like somebody else is going to deal with this, and you are the ones that have to deal with it. All right. So the next, I'm going to go quickly so that we can go through this. This is interactive a little bit. Sorry, I've been talking so much. If anybody has any questions, I only see 4 people on the side of my slot, but if anybody has anything, just unmute yourself and chat away. So the first risk factor, I think, is the most important risk factor for our groups, because it's focused on a lot of what I think is more of the unconscious bias, which is going to be the second half of this. But a risk factor is with only one employee of a protected class in a workplace or department or a location. And a lot of people think, well, then there's not going to be a lot of harassment. There's only one employee. But the issue is more, how is that person perceiving themselves in the job? And we're going to do this example, and I want to see who has concerns about it. John has multiple sclerosis. He walks with braces on his legs. He's the only employee with a disability working at your company. One day, you overhear Lydia, one of your employees, say, John makes us look a little better for disability hiring. You tell Lydia that you heard her comment about John, and she says, sorry, of course, I was just kidding. So does anybody want to chime in with any concerns you might have about a comment like that from someone you work with about somebody else? Anybody? You don't have to, because we're going to get to a poll in a second, but does anybody have any overall interest in chatting about it? No?
Yeah, I would just say that I wouldn't know how to handle it.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's not easy. Anybody else? Well, I'm gonna have you guys tell me how to handle it. Let's get to the poll.
I would just say ick.
Yeah, it's icky. Yeah, it is.
Like, do you work with this person? They could overhear you. I mean, just on that level, just on a personal level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But she said she was just kidding. So let's get to the poll. The next one is the poll. Oh my gosh, I keep hitting the wrong thing. All right, so what should you do? A, nothing. She was just kidding. B, further discuss the issue with Lydia while referencing your company's prohibition on comments like hers. Hopefully you had it. Those who don't have it are going to write those plans when we're off of this call. Realize it might be time for some interactive anti-discrimination staff training, or both B and C, or something else. And you can also, if there's something else, you might want to just let me know. Pretty on time. Oh boy. All right, one more person deciding. There we go. All right, so most people are going to be proactive about it, which is excellent. For those of you who were thinking, wow, she said I'm just kidding. And that is what we get a lot. And I've intervened in claims where people have said, I was just kidding. I wasn't, oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. I was just kidding. And the way you respond to someone who says they're just kidding is that kidding is not an excuse for your behavior. It's just not an excuse for your behavior. And that just shuts it down, because it's an excuse to say you're kidding. And if you look at it, I use these two analogies. If you were going to Logan Airport tonight and you were headed through the TSA security and you had your duffel bag and you put it on there and you said, I hope you catch my gun, it's going through. What do you think someone would do? I mean, nobody. And then if you say, oh, no, TSA, you don't have to knock me down and arrest me. I was just kidding. So we don't kid about that anymore. Nobody kids about that. People used to kid about it. I'm sure people used to say, oh, you found my ticking bomb, or mention bomb, or mention gun, or mention knife. Nobody does that anymore. It is enough for society to say, we don't screw around with terrorism. We don't screw around with guns and things at the security checkpoints. So we need to get to the point where that's the same thing about something that is an insensitive comment. We don't fool around. You don't say that anymore. Those things aren't said. You don't say that to a woman. You don't say that to a man. You don't say that to somebody who's older or somebody who's disabled. You just don't. You don't make those comments any longer. And until we can get to the point where we're at TSA, where you just wouldn't say that, or bad stuff happens, people are going to continue to say they're kidding. And a lot of people say, oh, it's all in good fun. It's not all in good fun. And just, you can remind people of TSA, and you can say, hey, we need to get to the point where this stuff is just snuffed out completely. It's the same thing with smoking. If you're in a building and you're sitting at your bank or at wherever you're sitting, and all of a sudden someone lights up a cigarette, your response would be, what? You don't do that. There are laws that prevent that. What are you doing? So those are two sort of analogous situations where it's just so not done. It's just so obvious that it's not done. And we have to get to that point. So if somebody does say they're just kidding, say, you know what, that's really not an excuse for insensitive comments any longer. And we need to talk about how this could make John feel, and how you have now reduced John to his disability. That's what you've done, where he's a contributing member of this work team, and you've reduced him to a disability hire, and it's not acceptable. So there's training that you can do for your own staff, and training that hopefully maybe Lydia would want to do, because you really need her to buy into that her comment was unacceptable. All right, so thanks for sharing that one, guys. Okay, this is the slide that I'm not going to go over, but it's for you all to take a look at when you have some time. It's how to develop a plan, what your policy should have in it. If you have policies, go back and make sure that there's clear information about how to complain, and that you are identifying the discrimination laws, all these things, and someone can help you in the legal or HR, but they all need to be in there. Strong statements from you and a signature from you, or from the highest person that you possibly can find to buy into it. The last four are just really important ways of nipping behaviors in the bud, is to apply the policy consistently. So you may be like, oh, I know Lydia, she's one of my best friends, and I really don't want to, make an issue of it, but you got to be consistent about it. You have to immediately deal with it. So sometimes you walk away and say, oh, you know what? I really should have said that to Lydia. Go back and say it. Do it when you think about it. Don't let time go by, because the immediacy is really important. And survey your workforce, especially if in any of those risk factors are part of it. So if you have somebody working in a remote area and you don't really know if they come in contact with people who maybe provide a hostile work environment, send a survey annually, a survey. And there are companies that help with surveys. We have workforce surveys. You can literally Google workforce surveys and you can find the questions that are important for the culture. And then obviously training, you know, you can't have too much training. All right, so now we've kind of ended the part about workforce, laws that are recognized behaviors prohibited under these laws. They're sort of obvious. They contribute to workplace toxicity. They contribute to discrimination. But what if the decisions that you're making, you don't really know, like Dave was saying, whether you're making the right decision based on your subconscious or based on some other reason that, that you're not even really aware of. That's the second part of this presentation. But I do want to stop for a minute to see if anybody has anything that they want to talk about with respect to the first section of the laws. And I'm happy to talk anytime with folks too.
Paul, in your experience, what's the most common types of discrimination you saw? Is it sexual discrimination? Is it age? Is it, what should we be most alert for happening in our organizations? What did you see?
Hostile work environments based on sex, whether that is female or transgender or sexual orientation has become a very big body of law, but race is probably still the highest. I don't know how to say this without sort of talking about these great books that are out there, but we had 350 years of slavery in this country, 100 years of Jim Crow laws in this country. Not till 1964 did people honestly say, okay, I've got to interact differently with a Black person. And it's here, it's still here. It hasn't gone away. And race discrimination in many different areas, not just employment, but race discrimination in healthcare and education and in criminal justice is, I'd say, the highest in terms of protection. Their disability is getting there because we have a very, very small workforce. And we only have, I think, 25% of disabled people are employed. So, we have to work on that. We really have to work on that because it leads to depression and it leads to suicide and all the other things. But so I'd say race and sex are the two that command the most amount of time and deserve the most amount of our attention at this point. And it's because of also subconscious issues. The biases that we're going to go over now, you can almost put them in any kind of perspective based on how you come to the table. So, well, does anybody have any other questions about just the overall? I will tell one story that would sort of, you'll understand it more in terms of sex discrimination. I was training a senator who didn't have a lot of time to meet with his group and so with his staff. So I was doing a private training and we were talking about sex discrimination. And he said, wow, I'm thinking that, maybe the way I interact with my staff, I don't know how to act. I don't know how to act these days. He was a little bit older and he was a little bit more from the sort of generation of, oh, hey, cutie, how's it going? How are things do? Like treating someone like a granddaughter, a woman. And I said, well, tell me how you interact. And he said, well, there's a lot of times that I'm not in the office. So when I am in the office in DC, I really like to have personal connections with all of the staff members. So they know I'm there, they know I'm paying attention to them, and I want to have personal connections with them. And I asked him for an example of a personal connection. And he said, well, so the young person who's at the desk, I walk in, I may say, wow, you did your hair differently. Your hair looks different. So she knows that I know that her hair looks different. And I said, okay. And he said, I may say to one of the boys or one of the young men, how was your golf game this weekend? And I said, these are all very innocuous statements when you think about it. I mean, don't you say those to people? Wow, your hair looks great. Oh, what'd you do this weekend? Or did you catch the game? All things that in a vacuum are absolutely innocuous. And you would hope that those kind of discussions go on in the workplace. But the next question I asked was, do you ever comment on their work? Because they work for you. They don't get their hair cut for you. They don't golf for you. They work for you. So you're probably that young woman who's answering the phones and dealing with the administration of your office is honestly worried about how she looks when you come in. Because you are noticing her looks. You're literally telling her your hair looks nice, or I like your blouse, or those are new earrings. You are creating a situation where she feels like it's her physical look that she needs to work on. And if you just said to her, hey, Susan, and you get this information from your chief of staff or anybody, I heard you had a particularly difficult constituent that called last week and you handled it like a pro. I want to just say congrats. That completely changes the way you have interacted with your staff person. And he was like his eyes were popping out of his head thinking, I should do that. That's great. That's what I'll do. So it wasn't like this senator was trying to belittle the way this person worked or focus on this person's physical characteristics, but that's sort of what he had come up with. So he said, I'll do that. I'll find out what people are doing and I'll make comments based on their work. I said, great, because it's a workplace, and people kind of forget that it's a workplace. And so these are the kind of conversations that need to go on, because I've always said in my presentations that there are sort of three types of people who create harassing environments and discriminate, but create hostile work environments. There's the person that literally has no idea that they are having this impact on someone. So they are saying things and like this person, this senator saying, you look great, or you like your hair. They're saying things that they don't realize are really creating a difficult interaction. And those people can be trained and taught and moved around. There's a second person who is saying something, maybe something a little bit more obscene, but when told says, I don't really care, toughen up. That's the second person. And then there's the third person who is saying, the third type of harasser, who's honestly saying, that's exactly what I want. I want that person to be in fear. I want that person to know I have the power and I can treat them any way I want. Those are the three. That's the continuum of harassing behaviors. So you have to figure out as employers and as company managers where your folks are on the continuum. Maybe they're great and they know all this and they could teach this class and they understand how to interact with people. But maybe they're the senator. It just needs a little, sort of reminding that these people we're a workplace and this is not your granddaughter sitting at the desk. And if they're the second person, then you need to say, you do have to care. And if you don't care, there will be consequences. And if they're the third person, you just need to fire them. They need to be gone. That person is not going to change. That person wants the power over the person that they're doing the conduct toward, and they're not going to change. Second, middle person, make it so that you comply or you're out. And then third person, get rid of. So you guys have to kind of think about where someone is when something happens. And don't always rush to think, oh God, I gotta get rid of this guy because he said this, or this woman. Women and men make the same amount of comments. It's really not, it's not based on a gender, but you do want to think about where they are in that space. Okay, any other questions? Sorry, that was a long answer to, I don't even remember your question, David, but I hope that was okay for everyone.
I think Sean had a question, right?
If someone has a question, sure.
No, I think I had a comment before, so no, I'm all set. I think, but what you said is, I really like that distinction of these three types of people, because I think we like to all I don't know. I like to believe that I can have an impact, and you're not going to have an impact on that third person other than getting them away from you. You need to give the middle person a chance, benefit of the doubt, that they might fall into the first category.
Yeah,
You know.
that they might be pushed over, and you can say to the second person, you don't care, but I do. So
Right.
this is our company and I care, and you can show that you have to care. The third person, you know, sort of a lost cause, because that's the high they get from being awful, and they're not going to be able to be saved. But there are a lot of people in the first category that just need some training and some discussion, and probably Lydia is one of them, you know. So moving on to unconscious bias. I am not a cognitive scientist. I'm not a neurologist or a neuroscientist or a social scientist. I am a lawyer, but this to me is one of the most important areas right now, especially from what is happening in the world. The bias that we know about is prejudice or stereotype in favor or against an individual or a group. That's what bias is. And we all have them, and they're actually can be wonderful. Conscious bias is what I just went over, a stated or acknowledged bias, that I don't want to hire a woman, I don't want to hire a man, I don't want to hire a person who's disabled. That's a conscious or explicit bias. And unconscious or implicit is formed outside of your awareness, and honestly, outside of your awareness. So I'm talking to all of you. You are all good people. You are all people who believe in equality. You want to make your work culture great. You are all the people who would be shocked to know that something that you decided that might not be good for your company was based on your subconscious, but it's just what is the case. And if you you can't beat yourself up for having biases. Nobody can, because it's human. And there's this book that's called Everyday Bias that I'm going to give a plug for. It's by Howard Ross, and he is a guy that's been doing this for 30 some odd years. He lives not too far from me down the street, and his company is since 1989 in Silver Spring, Maryland. He goes all over the world, and he talks about navigating unconscious judgments in our daily lives. And I put on here, and I don't know if Sarah's going to share this deck with everyone, but in it is a YouTube video of Howard's discussion at Google, which is really good, and it's something you should definitely watch. I can send it to people separately if you need to. He connects the topic of unconscious bias with just the whole world, and how we need to all recognize that we have unconscious bias based on just our brain. And so hopefully you guys will be able to take a look at that video at some point. So I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to tell you how this works. Do we have any like neurologists or neuroscientists that want to explain this before? No? Okay. So our brain, we're human, and we desire order. And what I like to say is everyone who is human has to create shortcuts. And these shortcuts for getting through the day are what you develop from age 0 to where you are now. And it's very basic, but we analyze situations and we're able to survive because we have some files in our brain that we have put in there based on media, past experiences, social constructs, family, relationships, all that goes in, and it creates our unconscious associations. Now, the issue for decision making, like David brought up, is that we use these files every day in almost everything we do. So if we're going to assess whether we're going to do something or assess a task, the files go on. We're going to look at a large group of people, and we have to figure out who are my friends, who are the people I know, who do I not know. Picture yourself walking into a bar, and you're going to say, oh, I know those people, I'm going to go over there. Okay, if you didn't know people and you weren't aware of connections, you would just stand there at the bar and wait for something to happen. But instead, you can interact and influence a group. We try to understand something by context. What is context? It's just accessing the files in our brain. That's the context that we see something. And we engage our emotions through our files. So how many of you have seen a commercial on TV or read a Hallmark card and just said, oh my gosh, that's a sad thing in the world. Well, it's probably not the saddest thing in the world, but it probably reminds you of something that's sad and makes your emotions stronger. Or if I hear a song, I'll say, oh my gosh, Whitney Houston, 1985. This reminds me of being at Avenue C with all my friends from college. And the song, you know, is accessing a file, which is accessing an entire experience that I've had. This is how it works. And the most important for you all is when we work quickly. You're all super busy people. You're trying to get things done. You're trying to get things done quickly. So of course, you're going to take some shortcuts based on your files. So in order to understand unconscious bias, you have to buy into the fact that you're trying to do something quickly and you're trying to get it done based on what you know. The expression that I use for this is, what about you as a person impacts how you show up every day? So when you get out of bed in the morning, you're you. What about you is creating your you? And so if I was asked that question, I'd say, well, I'm a mother, I'm a lawyer, I'm 54 years old, I'm a heterosexual female, I'm a Reformed Catholic. Someone gave me that, I heard that term somewhere. That's what I am. I am educated. These are all things about me that impact how I show up every day. And everybody is different. And so it's very easy to understand that all of our brains are different and we're all wired differently and we have different files. So let's see how the files are going to interact with us. Very basic, bias in action. I see a snake, I'm walking down the street. I'm not trained in zoology. I'm not a herpetologist. I looked that up, someone who studies reptiles. I'm going to look at that snake, and the files I'm going to have is, I don't like snakes. Snakes can hurt me. Snakes can kill me. I'm going to jump out of the way. I'm going to avoid that snake. Now, I didn't have to look at it any further. I didn't have to think about it. It was snake, boom, get out of the way. Somebody who shows up differently will be someone who is the herpetologist, who might say, oh my gosh, that snake's got 3 white spots on it. It must be a Gartner snake. Let me pick it up the way I learned in biology to pick up a snake. Completely different reaction to the snake. That's an obvious unconscious bias on my part, and a conscious decision to do something based on that person learning more about the snake, learning more about the snake and knowing more about the snake. I made the decision on the snake based on everything that I've been told about snakes. So let's go to another situation that happened in 2002 in DC area. There was a sniper. I don't know if you guys were aware of it, but there was a sniper. Just 1 year after 9/11, there was a sniper indiscriminately murdering people on the streets. About a mile from my home, a couple people were killed. And at the scene of a couple of these murders, it had been reported by the news that a white contractor van, those like white vans, was seen speeding away. So that was on the news and everybody was up in arms about the white contractor van. So when I went to I had 3 little kids at the time, and I had to go out late at night and get diapers or formula or something. And I went out, I drove into the parking lot of our grocery store, and I saw a white van. I said, I can't get out of this car. I mean, I've been told that this white van, you know, could be the sniper. I'm going to get shot walking into the giant. I went home and I just started to cry because I couldn't believe that I've been paralyzed. Our hometown had been paralyzed by the sniper. But I was avoiding the white van. A couple days later, thankfully, they apprehended the sniper, and he had been shooting out of the back of like a sedan. They had carved out something in the trunk and had been shooting people. And I think they killed about, I don't know, 12 or so people. It was just an awful time. So nothing to do with the white van. That was just something that you know, somebody had reported. Honestly, for the next 6 months, if I saw a white van, I would kind of sort of have a reaction, and then I'd be like, oh, wait, they caught the guy, it's not the white van. But my file for the white van was in there. And if it had gone on a lot longer, maybe a year looking for this guy, I honestly would be thinking even more about the white van. So that is exactly what bias happens. I should know, taking a beat, that this was not something that I needed to be worried about. And it's not the way I thought it was, but that was my reaction. So I want everyone, if you can, in the chat to put in, the last little analogy is, I went to see Jaws when I was 10, and when the legs were dangling in the ocean and the shark came up, I still can't go really swim in the ocean like that when I can see my legs dangling. It's awful, but that's what I say. I say, to this day, I can't really swim in the ocean because I think there's sharks. Now that's an innocent bias. It's not hurting anybody, but it's really kind of ludicrous because, ridiculous, because I obviously could get hit by lightning and I don't care about that. That's about the same odds as getting bitten by a shark, but it doesn't matter. In my brain, I do not want to go to swim in the ocean far out. So we'll have to retrain that. So can anybody in the chat, if you can think of something that to this day you just can't do. You can't, I don't know. I can't even think of what I want to tell you all because it's your own thoughts, but something you can't eat, someplace you can't go, some music you can't hear, something that is based on something you've experienced that to this day you can't blank. How do I do these? Am I able to get to, oops, shoot, I went back. I can't see the chat for some reason here. I don't know what's happening. Oh, there we go.
You go to your Zoom on the bottom.
I see. It was actually it's on the top of mine for some reason. I don't know why.
Interesting.
No, it's not coming up at all. Is it because the screen's being shared? This is weird.
It shouldn't be, but we have some feedback. David can't eat beets. Shauna said Friday the 13th, Jason popped out at a peaceful lake the day after the horror was expected to be over. I can no longer swim in a lake without worrying about what is below me. Lisa shared being around cigarette smokers.
Interesting.
Wendy shared that she can't walk across swinging plank bridges up high. Not sure what triggered.
Something triggered it, and you're not sure what triggered it. It's really clearly the subconscious. So everybody has something that is based on what they experience somehow. And this is another one of your takeaways. We're not going to go through this whole thing, but this is what they talk about when they talk effects of unconscious biases. It starts with observations, media, whatever comes into your brain, and you identify it as yes or no. I have to care about this, or I don't have to care about this. So if you think of yourself in junior high, you're listening to a teacher, and then someone will say, "Is this going to be on the test? Do I have to write this down? Do I have to know this?" That's kind of the way our brains work. Do I have to know this? And if you don't have to know it, you check out. If the teacher says, "No, I'm just talking, this isn't on the test," how many people paid attention to the rest of it? Nobody. So we seek more information for the information that pertains to us. We don't seek more information on the information that pertains to other people, because why would we? That's not us. And so, I am not Jewish. I was raised Catholic. I married a Jewish man. And honestly, if I had walked past something in college that said, Yom Kippur will be observed in the blah, 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 I would probably just race right past it. I'm not Jewish. I don't care about what's going on with Yom Kippur. Nowadays, right when we first started dating, I thought, well, what's this Yom Kippur stuff? What do we have to do for Yom Kippur? And all of a sudden it was something that I cared about because somebody I loved cared about it. And it was about me now. But before, I didn't focus on it. So if you think about your brain taking in all this information, you're probably not taking information about somebody who is disability. You're probably not taking information about somebody who has a different national origin than you do. You're taking information about something that pertains to you, which makes sense. And the problem is when you flip it over to the right side, you've got stereotypes that develop because you don't know about those other things. You start to not know about them, and maybe you start to develop the media, negativity about some other things. The patterns develop that you are developing a stereotype because you don't really know it. And then whatever information comes into your brain, you are filtering out. So you're saying, well, I don't have to learn this information for the test, and so I'm not going to care about the test. And any information that comes in about the test, I'm just going to push away. So if somebody says, well, you know, I really want to tell you about something that you have nothing to do with, let's say labor unions. Okay, this is a good example. Some people have this visceral, awful reaction to a teacher who goes on a strike, and this teacher, you know, should be teaching my children, and all they care about is their benefits and their health care and whatever. And I have this visceral reaction to how offensive these union people are. Well, obviously that's not all union people. Obviously not every teacher who's on a strike is the same, but the non-conforming information that shows, hey, this is why the teacher's doing it, or the unions are actually pretty good, the unions actually help people, that's being filtered out, because that doesn't help you make an us and them category. And this is what the whole focus on unconscious bias is. You're taking in what conforms to what you think, and you don't have enough information. So then we get to prejudice. So then you look for reasons to support that the unions are bad, and you're only going to look for those reasons. You're not going to, you know, you've already finished your observations in category left northwest, and now you're just saying, I've now made a judgment about these people because there's no information that's helped me. And then you start discriminating, and you outwardly treat people differently because you don't have enough information to treat them equally. And that's just how, oops, shoot, that shouldn't happen, sorry. That's just really how oh my gosh, I'm screwing up here, guys. My mouse is off, sorry. That's just how unconscious bias works when you're not the same as the person that you should be learning more about. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because this is, I know it's not really easy, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about how you're wired to not think about things that don't involve you necessarily, and you show up with what you are. So the first case that I ever had was representing an employee who was in Walla Walla, Washington. He worked for the Army Corps of Engineers. When I was like 27 or so, I flew out there to represent this guy because he was being fired for sort of joyriding in one of the Army Corps of Engineers trucks. And you know, he had said, I wasn't joyriding, I was driving the truck after a conference that I had gone to. I'd gotten in an accident in a snowstorm, and I was driving it to show my manager before I brought it back to the depot. So I went, and it was like the easiest case because he had a reason why he was doing it. He wasn't misusing the vehicle at all. And I was frankly shocked that they even had the case, but they did. So after the hearing with the judge, I said, let's go meet for dinner. He and his wife wanted to take me out to dinner before I headed back to DC. And this is who showed up at the restaurant. And this isn't the actual guy, but this is exactly what he was wearing. I didn't want to, you know, go too far with it. But so literally this was my friend Rob. And I looked at him and I said, oh my goodness. He said, this is me, Paula, this is me. And I said, oh, well, you were wearing a jacket at the hearing yesterday. And I had no idea that you were interested in motorcycles. He's like, yeah, I'm in this club and that club and this club and that club. And I've traveled across the country. And he started telling me all about his experience being a biker. And it just dawned on me that, of course, the woman who wanted this guy fired and was going to use any excuse she could, which was this bogus misuse of a government vehicle, was because she thought, yeah, this is the kind of guy that would misuse the government vehicle. I don't really care about the details. I've seen him before, and that's the guy. That was my first big, like, wow, if he didn't have a union and he didn't have any representation, he would be gone and nobody would have known why. Instead, he had a 25-year career with the Army Corps of Engineers and with commendations and promotions. And that was the picture of workplace bias. And for me, that was sort of eye-opening to trying to not picture people, treat people differently based on their appearance. And I'm sure you can think about ways that you might treat someone differently. I know Patty and I talk a lot about being very exuberant all the time. We're very outgoing. We have hard handshakes, and that's just the way we were brought up in an Italian family. If you wanted to talk, you had to talk louder than the other people who were talking. And so we tend to, in interviews, like talking to people who are talkative. And if someone's a little bit shy or maybe, doesn't really engage as quickly, we tend to, I'm not sure they're right for the job, I'm not sure. And this happened in a number of times when I've hired law clerks, and the law clerk that was the shyest, that I didn't even want to hire, but no one else wanted to come to her office, and she was a 5th pick, ended up being the smartest, most incredible worker that I've ever experienced. And I remember thinking to myself, I was just wrong. I was wrong that a shy person who doesn't match my energy level isn't one of the most brilliant people that I've met. So those are the kinds of things that you just kind of want to be aware of. And to David's point, this is the most important part of unconscious bias, because in the workplace, there are even more areas than this. Actually, Howard Ross goes over this in the book, all the different areas, and he has at the last chapter of his book ways to avoid these kind of decision making based on unconscious bias. But almost every decision that you make is based on your unconscious bias, every single one, because you cannot avoid it. And your perceptions, like I said, how you are impacts how you bring your decision making. And let's just start with recruiting. And at the top here, the question for everybody, I should have put this on a poll. Does anybody use blind resumes where you do not see the person's name or address? Does anybody use those when you're hiring people? Do we have it? Once again, I can't see the chat, so you have to let me know. I should have done a poll, sorry about that. But blind resumes are sort of the way now to do things, because a lot of people would look and say, I can't even pronounce that name. I don't really want to bring that person in. Or, oh my gosh, this person lives over there. I don't know. Or ages. We have had our assistants redact ages where people say where they graduated from something, because really, does it matter? I mean, if they've had 7 years of experience in something, that's great. We don't really want to know when they graduated from college. That's age discrimination if you have to know how old the person is. Now you can say 7 years here, 8 years here, you can kind of connect the dots, but do you really need to know how old someone is? I don't think so. So blind resumes is really a way to avoid your subconscious bias. Structured interviews is another one. Structured interviews should be a requirement of every company, because if you get a resume, if I get a resume and it says member of AE Pi, Alpha Epsilon, what is it, Pi, I might say, oh my gosh, my son's an AE Pi. You're an AE Pi? That's so great. Where were you? Did you enjoy it? Did you give up? So where's the structure in that? I'm literally going to the connection that I have with this person because he and my son, and he could be a great employee or could maybe be one of the more brilliant people, but because someone else isn't in AE Pi, did I make a connection with him that all of a sudden he's better for the job? These are kind of things that and connections are really important. Obviously, you want to do that, but structured interviews are about the work. And so you want to get the person to be able to answer every question. You want to ask them important questions, and maybe you can get to the personal take on their resume as well. But it's really important to structure it. Everybody gets the same questions. Everybody gets to answer the same questions. So that's hiring. And recruiting, I mean, this is the biggest one. Where are you recruiting? You're just going up to the job boards, or are you maybe going out to community boards? Are you going to historically Black universities and colleges? Are you going to technical colleges? Are you going to places where maybe somebody doesn't have, the LinkedIn that they're supposed to have, that everybody's supposed to know they're supposed to have? And if somebody isn't on those boards or able to get to you, are you trying to get to them? Are you really expanding your pool of candidates for somebody who may be bringing more to a project than the regular people that you would have bring to the project? Mentoring is a huge issue. Does somebody who you may hire does not do the same things that other people will do, or has different traditions, and are you connecting them to somebody so somebody can learn about their traditions? Or are they just going off and doing their own traditions and then nobody's talking about them because nobody else has those traditions? So a mentor or a partner when you come into a workplace is so important, especially one of those homogenous workplaces where most people are the same but somebody's not. Focusing on that person and asking them to share their traditions and makes them included. When you don't do that, people will leave. MIT, actually, someone had brought up MIT. They have this fascinating tree. It's their diversity and inclusion department has this decision tree, and they work on different issues. One of them was freshmen being able to get to a level where they're comfortable in college, and there were all these questions that were asked, and one started with, you know, a young girl or a young boy has an interaction with a professor, and it's a negative interaction, and they go somewhere to talk about it and don't get any help, and their roommate says nothing, and the decision tree, they end up leaving. And then there was another decision tree where if something else happened, like a mentor or somebody noticed them or somebody talked to them, then they stayed. And it was the same thing happened. It didn't happen more than one time to them, but the decision tree of whether someone's there to help them out was a really important part of their retention. And you spend all this time trying to get good talent, you want to conclude them and keep them. And lastly on this, I'm not going to go over every one of them, but performance reviews. The Howard Ross talks about a good friend of his who is a psychologist, I think, and she would write reviews for people. And she found when she would write her reviews, she would talk about women being nice and men being competitive. And she thought, you know, I looking back at my reviews and I say, oh, Sarah's great. She's so helpful and kind, and I really enjoy her compassion. And then she would say something sort of masculine about the guys. And then she just thought, what am I doing? Like I am, my subconscious is taking over about how I think women should be or how I think men should be. And she was really kind of annoyed with herself that she had created those kind of performance reviews. So then she would start doing reviews about people and just answering specific questions, because she couldn't get away from those focuses. So, and discipline, obviously, that's my friend Rob. You know, he was fired for just, you know, a subconscious feeling about him. So here we go. I'm gonna stop talking for a second. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Let's test your unconscious bias. You guys may have seen this before. A boy and his father are in a car accident. The father dies at the scene. The boy is rushed to the hospital for an operation. The doctor is about to operate, but says, I can't operate on this boy. He is my son. So I really wish I could see the chat. Maybe if I stop sharing my screen, I can see the chat. Is that possible? Let me see. No. All right, doesn't matter.
If you exit from full screen, you'll be able, it'll come up.
If I exit from what? Say that again?
Exit from full screen, it'll be at the top right.
Oh, just escape. There you go. Okay, so now, did anybody put anything in there? And it's on the top right now?
It'll look like a little square maybe. It should say exit full screen. You may be in full screen, which is why it might not come up at the bottom, the chat.
Here's Zoom.
I'm not sure.
Is it? No. Exit full screen. It says stop sharing and you are screen sharing. Exit.
So we have some responses here. It's his mother or gay couple. Responses to the question.
No, it's not coming up for me. I don't know why. All right. So who said it's a gay couple? Who's the smart person? No, I'm just kidding. Because I have literally I've asked this question of a lot of people. If they've never heard this, and I know this is from like 2000 something, but if, or 19, whatever, if people hadn't heard this, some were stumped. My neighbor, I walked, I said, I'm going to use this on a presentation. She's like, oh, I've never heard of that. I don't know, grandfather? I'm like, what? Grandfather? What are you talking about? We're talking about a mother, you know, a parent. And she had never heard of it, even being a woman. So she was still stuck in the, it's a woman. And then I'd say, well, what about, he has two dads because his dads are married. And that was, you know, the next step. That's the next step. So the point of this is not the riddle, but how the riddle changes to accept more and more and more of the reality of the world, and to have our subconscious biases react in a way that we quickly know this obviously could be a gay couple, obviously could be a mom, obviously could be a transgender woman, or, you know, so these are ways that we want to go to the next step, and we want to have everybody, you know, moving along with us. And the person who said the gay couple, did that just pop into your head, or did you know that this was morphed into a better question?
Well, my mom was into, you know, women's rights back in the 70s. So I had heard this back then, and it was his
Mhm.
mom, and that stumped everybody then.
All right.
And then I do work in the diversity area. So I started thinking about, okay, it's an old one. So mom, who else could it be? Gay
Oh, very
couple.
good. Okay, good. Yes. So it is an old one, and you know, glad that people said mom, and even happier that people say gay couple, because that's not, I think if someone wasn't working in the diversity area, it would be tough for them to conjure that, but it's great that it is, and that's, you guys will know that now. So the next, let me see, where are we? I want to get a minute to be able to talk to you all. So this is important because I want you to know that what we're focusing on is really the in-groups and the out-groups. And the in-groups on the left side are, you know, just picture Mad Men. And it's not about men necessarily. It's just the way things were and the way history was. And we're moving to out-groups being in the middle, and or even in groups. That's what we're moving toward, but that is the reality of what the workplace was like, the workplace, and other areas too. And the big issue is, this is a picture of my daughter Emma when she was on her like 3rd season with the Cardinals all boys team, and she wrote her college essay about it because she was given the opportunity to be on this. She tried out and made the team. It was a thrill of her life, and she was probably in the middle in terms of skill and ability. Not the worst player on the team, but not the best player. And some of those kids actually went on to play baseball in college, but she was given that opportunity. And so she now, you know, obviously most of these people, once you get the opportunity, you recognize that that's all you needed. You needed an opportunity, and that's what people need in the workplace. Now, the reason why people are not given opportunities is because of this type of behavior from this this belief perseverance is what it's called. And so this is another really important issue in diversity and inclusion areas, because belief perseverance is maintaining a belief despite new information that firmly contradicts the belief. That's what belief perseverance is. And I think we have that in our society, and I think it's really tough to counteract it, but we're going to try. So this is something that came out of our family. My sister sent this food, please, for the love of food safety, stop washing your chicken, to the family chat. And it's an article from the Occupational Safety and Health Research, and all this was developed to say you don't wash chicken. You take chicken out and you put it on the grill or wherever, but you don't wash it because you can spread the salmonella through the drops of water. And the response from my mother, 80 years old, was, you could never convince me not to rinse chicken. After rinsing and patting dry with paper towels, I decontaminate the sink, counter, cutting board with ammonia or cleanser. Then I put bowls, knives, etc. into the dishwasher. And my response was, seems like a lot of work when you can just cook the crap out of the chicken to actually ensure the salmonella is dead. So she honestly, faced with years and decades that they've been looking at food safety, these, you know, scientists, is going to say, no, I don't care. Not going to wash chicken. Not going to wash chicken. I'm only going to wash chicken. And she knows that salmonella can spread, and she knows that it's probably much more dangerous to do what she's doing, but she's still doing it. And belief perseverance creates the backfire effect, where people are strengthened when others attempt to present evidence. So this is what we're dealing with in our society right now, in the world. workplaces. So we're dealing with people feeling guilty about learning about bias and then saying, well, forget it, I don't care. And there's all this sort of backfiring of belief perseverance is about who can do the work right and who can do it. And we need to get over that. And just having conversations like this actually really helps us get over it. I want to hear from you all now, because it's really coming up at 6 o'clock, that if you were able to recall a time in your life when you felt different for any reason. So as an exercise, think to yourself, when were you in the out group and how did that experience affect you? Because we have people in the out groups who are experiencing that on a daily basis. And if we can somehow figure it out ourselves, what that feels like and what is needed to make people feel comfortable in the workplace, we'd be able to do a lot more for them. And that's one question I want you to think about. And then also, I want you to answer this question: just by looking at me, you can't tell. That to me is the question that most people will come up with something that is really important to them, or is something they haven't shared. And when you think about people in diverse backgrounds or people with who are not part of the in group, they have so much more than what you're looking at. So just by looking at me, you can't tell. And I'll start. Just by looking at me, you can't tell that I had a heart attack at age 47. Just by looking at me, you can't tell that. I'd have to talk to you about it. You'd have to get to know me. You'd have to understand the background of it. So now, of course, once again, the chat is not helping me out here, but what, does anybody have something that they feel that is important to say, just by looking at me, you can't tell, which would be analogous to a person who you can see something about them that is one of the protected class protections. Anybody have anything they want to share?
Louise said, just by looking at me, you can't tell where I am from.
All right. Some people think they can tell where someone's from. When my name, Sumberg, most people think that I'm Jewish, but that's my married name, and I'm actually Catholic. So a lot of people, would assumed that I was Jewish. They'd see my name and then they'd say, "Oh, is your son going to be bar mitzvah?" I'm like, "Oh no, actually, it was fine, perfectly fine for someone to say that, but there are just connections that people make based on names or looks or ages or that are usually, sometimes they're just wrong." Does anybody want to share anything? Just by looking at you, you can't tell?
I think more than the I can't tell, I've also experienced people projecting who I am based on my looks or what I believe, or what my attitudes are, or, my values.
Absolutely.
And I don't appreciate that at all.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes like I get judged, especially in this environment where everything's kind of, I don't know. There's so much more awareness of racial injustices, and I have a child who's particularly aware of these sorts of things, and I hear a lot of I feel criticized for just being a privileged white person. And I'm aware that I'm a privileged white person, but what I say to them is, what do we want for everybody? And how do we wield our power? That's, I don't want people to criticize me for being who I am. And I feel like there's a lot of criticism for, what people consider wealthy white people.
Mm-hmm. Well, your response to that would be, just by looking at me, you can't tell I'm a civil rights activist. I believe in civil rights forever. I mean, it goes both ways.
Exactly.
It's something that it's not fair for other people to claim something about you either. And you know, there are shocking ends of movies where the person that you think is this horrible person ends up being, you know, the savior of the person, or acts very differently than what the whole movie had led you to believe that person was going to be like. And
Right.
and so we have to say to other people, just by looking at me, you can't tell. And I want to know, just by looking at you, what is it that I can't tell?
Right.
And we have to dig deeper. And you're exactly right that you're not just something by looking at you, that somebody can size you up, and that's where our unconscious bias does.
Right.
Because it's the associations we've added to other people when we shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Paula, that was really powerful. For better or worse, we're out of time.
Yes, we're good. This is the very last slide, and you guys can just take a look at it. Not beat yourself up about anything that you might be making decisions on, but just try to think about ways that you can, you know, manage those connections between your thoughts and your actions.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. This was super powerful. I
You're
learned
welcome.
a lot. I'm going to be thinking much more deeply about my biases, how I communicate them with my team. And I think this is going to create some thought-provoking discussions within our team. And my next, we have a weekly team meeting at 4 o'clock on Mondays, and I'm going to bring up some of these issues. And
Great. And if anybody can get this book, Everyday Bias, you know, or your EO group, or I'll happy to send my copy to someone if they want to read it. It's really fascinating. A lot of great studies in there and just a lot of good information.
very powerful. I hope you changed us, and hopefully we can share that wisdom with others. Thank you. It made an impact on a lot of people.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. It was enjoyable.
Thanks, Paul. It was
hours.
fantastic.
Thank
Yeah.
Really
you.
enjoyed
Great.
it.
Thank you very much,
Bye,
Paula.
everyone. See you later.
Paul, I know you
All right.
can't see the chat, so I just want to let you know that your praises are being sung right now, and everyone
Why I
is
can't see the
very
chat?
grateful.
Just by looking at me, you don't know that I'm very technically challenged.
We'll do a Zoom session.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so
I
much,
appreciate that.
Paula. Thank you, everybody, for
All
going
right.
to our
Bye,
event.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye-bye.